Welcome to AP Environmental Science. In this video, we are going to briefly discuss some of the ways in which agriculture is made more sustainable. Now, the overall goal of sustainable agriculture is to feed the world's population without destroying the land or polluting the environment or reducing biodiversity, which is really a tall order because we need to meet our needs for foods and fibers, but we have to do this and encourage healthy soil quality and reduce our use of non-renewable resources and fossil fuels, but do it all economically so we can still make a profit and still continue farming year after year. Now, within sustainable agriculture, there's two big pieces, and those are soil conservation and improving soil fertility. Now, soil conservation is really just preventing soil erosion. And within each of these, there are several practices, and we'll go through those one at a time. The first practice that we'll talk about is called contour plowing. Now, the whole purpose behind contour plowing is to prevent erosion and to prevent water from moving between the rows in a straight line down towards the bottom of the hill. So with contour plowing, you plant along the contours of the land. So as that water moves from the top of the hill to the bottom, it has to go over little ridges each time it goes down a row. The next way of reducing soil erosion is through planting what are called windbreaks, and these are often rows of trees in between fields. Now, contour plowing primarily addresses water-based erosion. Windbreaks addressed wind-based erosion. So what happens is as that wind blows across the landscape, when it hits these trees, the trees kind of slow it down enough to allow any soil that's being carried with the wind time to settle out. And this helps prevent that soil from being carried over long distances. Think about the Dust Bowl and how catastrophic that was, where entire swaths of topsoil were carried across the North American continent. The third method for soil conservation is called perennial crops. Now, a perennial is something that does not need to be planted every year. In fact, you plant it once and it keeps coming back over and over and over again. Now, an annual plant is something that you have to replant, such as corn or soybeans, whereas a perennial is something that, again, does not have to be replanted, and this is something like a fruit tree or herbs or nuts. These are going to keep producing plants or producing crops year after year without having to be reseeded. The fourth way of reducing soil erosion is through terracing. Now, terracing is going to be seen more often in Southeast Asia, and this is a way to prevent that erosion due to water moving from the top of a hill down to the bottom. So this creates little steps, and on each step is a platform that's flat, and that is where the farming or agriculture takes place. The fifth way of soil conservation, or fifth method, is no-till agriculture. Now, no-till means that we are not tilling or turning that soil over in between crop plantings. So the next crop is planted directly into the same field and soil and debris from the previous year. Now, the benefit is that you have less erosion happening because the root structure should still be in place and should still be able to hold that soil in one area. The drawback is without that tilling, there's still all of the compaction in the soil from the previous year, and you're going to actually see a bit of a decrease in the yield of that new crop. But again, this is a way to reduce the amount of erosion. The final method is called strip cropping. And strip cropping is not primarily seen on large-scale agriculture, particularly in the United States. This is more of a smaller scale type operation, where you are planting two totally different crops side by side with each other. So say you have a row of corn next to a row of peas. Now the benefit is that these two crops should be able to work synergistically, and that should reduce your need for fertilizers and pesticides. But the drawback is when it comes to harvest, This is really tricky to bring your crop in. And that's because it requires specialized equipment or to do that harvest by hand. And that's very time consuming and again, very expensive. Now, the other side of creating a more sustainable agricultural system is improving that soil fertility. And there's multiple ways to accomplish this. The first one being crop rotation. Now, crop rotation can take several different forms, and really what we're doing is rotating what is planted on a specific location year after year. And the idea is that you are rotating the crops so that way the crops are recycling those nutrients through the soil to prepare that soil for the next crop. Now, it does not necessarily have to follow this legume, root, fruit, leaf cycle, but sometimes it does. And I think it's a good illustration of how you can have a variety of crops planted in a single area. The second piece of improving soil fertility is this idea of green manure. Now, to be perfectly honest, green manure is not widely used. However, it is an option where a very specific type of plant or crop that can be grown in a field when you're not growing your targeted crop. And instead of harvesting this plant, you simply till it into the soil. And as the plant material is breaking down in the soil, it is adding in those nutrients to help cycle them back into the soils. The third piece involves balancing the pH of the soil. Remember, if the soil is too acidic or too alkaline, we're going to see issues with growing the crops. So we need to find that right balance. Now, more often than not, you're going to have soil that has too much acid in there. So to neutralize that, farmers will often add limestone. Now, that calcium carbonate in the limestone will neutralize the acid, and that's also going to allow the plants to uptake nutrients from the soil more efficiently. Rotational grazing is another way to address sustainable agriculture. Now, this is not so much about growing plants, but about growing livestock. And this is rotating which pasture the animals are feeding in. Now, this gives the plants time to regenerate and replenish themselves after being intensively grazed, and it helps to reduce the overall impact on the land. The final piece would be organic agriculture. And I threw this in here because a lot of students have this misconception that organic agriculture is the same as sustainable agriculture, when in reality, organic agriculture only means that there are not any chemicals that are artificially or man-made produced being added to that particular field. So in organic agriculture, no synthetic fertilizer, no synthetic pesticides. You can still use GMOs, you can still use conventional production means, but you are not using any added chemicals. So that's really the big difference here. And although labor costs can be higher without using some of these fertilizers or pesticides, at the consumer end, you are able to charge a premium because a lot of people see the label of organic and think that there's a whole lot more to it than there actually is, and they're willing to pay more. So again, organic agriculture does not mean we're changing the nutritional value of the food. We are simply saying that there were not any synthetic chemicals applied. Now, in summary, we talked about a lot of different sustainable agriculture practices in this video. Make sure that you took good notes, go back, rewatch any sections, pause the video to write down any bits that you missed. Please send me your questions here at the end, and I hope that as you watch this video, you were able to learn something.